Welcome to the Atlantic Perspectives podcast.
Welcome to the White House in Europe with Maxime Lobé. In the last episode, we saw how the United States was born from a European dream, a dream of independence, freedom, and sovereignty. We left America in 1789. As the hero of the Revolutionary War, George Washington is about to become the very first president of the US. It is still a fragile republic. No standing army, no permanent capital, and only a young, untested diplomacy. But already, it is a country that draws attention and fear from European monarchies. In New York, in April 1789, the city holds its breath. People crowd the streets to catch a glimpse of a man on a horseback, wrapped in a dark cape, George Washington. He is 57 years old, and he carries the hopes of a nation still under construction. He did not want this job. He would rather stay in Mount Vernon, on his plantation, far from politics. But the people call him, and Congress does too, because he is one of the figures who can unite the 13 states around one common project. On April 1789, at Federal Hall, Washington takes the oath of office. His voice is calm. His movements are measured. Next to him stands John Adams, his vice president, a former diplomat in London, watching in silence. That day, the US officially enters history, and Europe, curious but suspicious, watches the New World invent modern democracy. In the capitals of London, Paris, and Vienna, diplomats wonder, can a republic without a king born from rebellion really last? From the first days, President Washington understands he's walking on a tightrope. Everything must be built: institutions, money, diplomacy, the army, alliances. There is still no official capital. The government is based in New York for now. Around Washington is a circle of exceptional men. Alexander Hamilton at the Treasury, Henry Knox at War, Edmund Randolph at Justice, and Thomas Jefferson handling foreign affairs. But before we go further, one event shakes the young republic. Benjamin Franklin dies on the 17th of April 1790 in Philadelphia. The old man, 84 years old, passes away peacefully at home. Inventor of the lightning rod, philosopher, and diplomat, Franklin was more than a founding father. He was the enlightened conscience of America. During the Revolutionary War, he won over Paris, charmed the salons of Versailles, and, most importantly, convinced King Louis XVI to support the American cause. America owes its decisive alliance with France to him. Without that alliance, victory might never have happened. In France, his death is mourned like the death of a universal hero. The National Assembly stands to honor him. Mirabeau praises the memory of the genius who freed America and poured floods of light over Europe. Across Europe, people admire Franklin's wisdom, his spirit, his tolerance. And in Philadelphia, thousands of Americans follow his coffin in silence. For Washington, Franklin was the living link between the old world and the new one. With his death, the young republic loses its greatest diplomat and its finest bridge to enlightenment Europe. One world is fading, the world of philosophy and ideals, while another takes over, the world of politics, institutions, and power. In this new world, two men represent two very different visions of America. Hamilton, Secretary of Treasury, wants a strong, organized state, one that can earn respect from European powers. In 1791, he creates the first Bank of the United States to centralize public finances and build the nation's credit. Across from him stands Thomas Jefferson, Secretary of State, with a completely different idea. Back from France, where he witnessed the early days of the Revolution, Jefferson believes in the virtue of the people and the right of the states. America, he says, must stay true to the spirit of 1776, a nation of independent farmers distrustful of speculation and debt. He admires Paris. Hamilton prefers London. And you? Which side would you choose? Hamilton's strong federal state or Jefferson's farmer republic? From the start, two souls clash inside the same government. And without fully realizing it, Washington watches the birth of American two-party politics. The Federalists on one side with Hamilton and the Democratic Republicans on the other, led by Jefferson and Madison. While the US searches for its past, Europe catches fire. In Paris, the people storm the Bastille. In Philadelphia, American newspapers celebrate their French brothers in arms. Our ideals cross the Atlantic, Jefferson probably tells himself, with excitement. But very quickly, enthusiasm turns into fear. The terror begins in France. Heads fall. Louis XVI is executed. And Europe's monarchies join forces against France. London, Madrid, Vienna, Berlin, every court in Europe looks toward America. They fear the spread of revolutionary ideas. They watch this republic across the Atlantic that dares to exist without a king. Even Russia and Sweden, officially neutral, follow this political experiment from a distance, finding it both fascinating and dangerous. One of the strongest personal links between America and Europe has a name: Lafayette, Le Marquis, hero of American independence and close friend of Washington. He embodies the alliance of ideals on both sides of the Atlantic. But in France, the revolution consumes him. As commander of the National Guard, he tries to moderate the chaos, and in 1792 he is arrested by the Austrians. Thousands of miles away, Washington follows his fate. Lafayette becomes the symbol of a friendship tested by history. And it is in this context that, in the spring of 1793, a flamboyant French diplomat arrives in Charleston. Americans call him Citizen Genet. His arrival creates huge excitement. Crowds cheer him. Banquets are held. Toasts are raised to liberty and Franco-American friendship. Many Americans see him as the living symbol of the 1778 alliance with France, the alliance of freedom against tyranny. But soon, the dream becomes a diplomatic nightmare. Remember, France and Britain are still bitter enemies, and the US has declared neutrality in the conflict between Great Britain and France. Genet, confident he has America's support, goes too far. Without asking the US government, he arms French privateers in American ports, private ships allowed to attack British vessels. He recruits American sailors, fits out ships under the French flag, and launches raids against British colonies in the Caribbean. And he does all of that from US territory. Thomas Jefferson, still Secretary of State, tries to calm the situation. He meets Genet several times and reminds him, American neutrality applies to everyone. Jefferson is known to sympathize with France and with the revolutionaries. But Hamilton, the Secretary of the Treasury, believes ties with Great Britain matter more. Here again, we see the political divide: Hamilton's Federalists versus Jefferson's Democratic Republicans. Genet is not impressed by American warnings, and he keeps arming privateers. In your view, who is right here? Loyalty to yesterday's ally, or neutrality that protects the national interest? Enough is enough. Washington calls his cabinet and decides to officially demand Genet's recall to Paris. Even Jefferson, despite his pro-French instincts, supports the decision because the authority of the US government is at stake. A few months later, revolutionary France, embarrassed by a representative who has become uncontrollable, recalls Genet. Ironically, Genet will stay in the US, afraid he would face the guillotine if he returned to France. The Genet affair becomes the first major diplomatic crisis in American history, the moment the young republic asserts its sovereignty against an intrusive ally. The scandal, the terror in France, and growing divisions at home pushed Jefferson to resign at the end of 1793. His successor, Edmund Randolph, the first U.S. Attorney General, brings a more pragmatic tone. A careful lawyer, he tries to keep neutrality while preserving dialogue with Paris. He now has to manage the consequences of Washington's Europe policy. Consequences? Yes, because Washington has made his choice. On the 22nd of April 1793, he issues the Proclamation of Neutrality. He declares that the US will follow a friendly and impartial conduct toward the warring powers. This is a foundational text. The young republic will not enter Europe wars. It is a decision driven by reason of state and by economic caution. The country simply does not have the means to fight. Jefferson opposes neutrality in the name of revolutionary friendship. Hamilton supports it, because it protects peace and prosperity. Focused on finance and growth, Washington imposes his line, launching what later will be called America's isolationist tradition. But staying neutral is not enough. After independence, tensions with Great Britain remain high. London limits American exports, still holds forts in the north, and seizes merchant ships under the excuse of war with France. Facing the risk of a new conflict, Washington sends a trusted envoy to London, John Jay, Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. With Hamilton's support, Hamilton wants a better ties with Britain, Jay wins only limited concessions. Britain agrees to evacuate the fort and give the US most favored nation trade status. But it keeps trade restrictions and claims the right to seize cargo headed to France. Jay's treaty is deeply unpopular, but it is ratified in 1795. Despite public anger, Washington enforces it, convinced it keeps peace with Britain and gives the young country time to grow stronger. For France, it feels like a betrayal. The French ambassador in the US, Joseph Fauchet, sends a diplomatic report to Paris about his talks with Randolph, describing him as hesitant and easy to influence. The report is intercepted by the British Navy and passed to Washington. It suggests that Randolph, Jefferson's successor in foreign affairs, might have shared information with France or leaned toward France during the negotiations with Britain over Jay's treaty. In reality, it was a diplomatic misunderstanding. But Washington, determined to protect the government's credibility, treats it as a blow to loyalty. Randolph is humiliated and forced to resign. Washington then gives the State Department to Timothy Pickering, a former officer in the Revolutionary War, strict and methodical. Under Pickering, American diplomacy becomes more structured, firm with France, cautious with Britain, and careful with Spain. At the same time, another negotiation unfolds in the south. Spain, under King Charles IV, fears American expansion toward Louisiana, but instead of confrontation, Spain chooses diplomacy. The Treaty of Pinckney, signed in 1795, sets the southern border and opens navigation on the Mississippi River. For Washington and Pickering, it is a major diplomatic victory. Trade expands, the West grows, and the young nation gains credibility. Yet, at home, divisions get worse. The feud between Jefferson and Hamilton leaves deep scars. Newspapers explode. Pamphlets spread. Parties organize. Washington, exhausted, regrets the rise of factional politics. His enemies accuse him of ambition, greed, even hidden monarchism. But he stays the course. Before leaving office, he delivers a message to his country. A political testament, the farewell address, published in newspapers in 1796. The permanence of the Union is the first object of every patriotic desire, and he adds, Europe has a set of primary interests which have little or no relation to ours. This becomes the first great American diplomatic doctrine: independence, prudence, neutrality. The three pillars of US foreign policy for the next century. In March 1797, in Philadelphia, the temporary capital while Washington D.C. is being built, George Washington steps down, under the applause of Congress. He returns to Mount Vernon, keeping his promise not to seek a third term. His exit set a precedent: the peaceful transfer of power and a new republican tradition. In Europe's capitals, diplomats watch this scene with amazement. A head of state who willingly gives up power? A people who applaud his departure? Monarchical Europe has never seen that. The young American Republic has just given the old world a lesson. George Washington dies in December 1799. France, ruled by the Directory, declares 3 days of national mourning. Great Britain, his former enemy, honors a great man. In 2 terms, Washington built a state, shaped a diplomacy, and defined a clear line toward Europe: respect, prudence, independence. He resisted the temptation of alliances, the chaos of revolution, revenge, and pride. He chose peace over glory. In the next episode, we will talk about his successor, John Adams, leading a country already divided, inheriting a fragile balance between Britain and France, a man caught between loyalty to Washington and the passion of a world in turmoil. This was The White House and Europe with Maxime Lobet. To make sure you never miss an episode, subscribe to the podcast. You can find Atlantic Perspectives on social media and all content at www.atlanticperspectives.org. Music licensed via Epidemic Sound.